I spoke to Republican Congressman Bob Good of Virginia just moments ago, and I began by asking him what he wanted to see next from Speaker McCarthy.
What I'd like to see him do is agree to try a one-week continuing resolution where with a commitment to pass 2 or hopefully 3 bills in the next week. That would allow the government to stay open, and we continue to make progress on passing our spending bills. As you know, we've passed 4 spending bills out of the House while the Senate hasn't passed any, so the House has been more active. We should have already passed all 12 of ours, and I regret that we have not. But that would be my hope, that he would do that, that he would and give us the calendar, the commitment to pass all of our spending bills. I think we could do that by October 15. That would minimize any impact of a shutdown. If the Senate is not willing to go along with keeping the government open, at least the House could pass its bill, send them to the Senate, and do that, I would think, by October 15. Congressman,
as you know, those spending bills are not enough to keep the government open, and they wouldn't garner bipartisan support. But I do want to follow up with you on this 1-week CR. Is that realistic? Do you think that that could potentially pass and avert a shutdown, or is a shutdown all but inevitable at this point?
Well, a shutdown is probable based on past history. The Senate hasn't shown any willingness to cut spending, any interest in securing the border. Unfortunately, the Senate Republicans have joined with Senate Democrats trying to raise spending, at least from a leadership McConnell standpoint. And then it's still kind of amazing the Senate still hasn't passed any of their spending bills. Can you just imagine if Hakeem Jeffries was agreeing with us to cut spending? The House would have long ago passed our 12 bills if the House Democrats were agreeing with us. But that said, we're responsible for what we do in the House, and we should have already passed our 12 bills, but we can do that now. We need to continue the momentum from last night where we passed 3 bills. Regret we didn't pass all 4, but we need to bring the Ag bill back, bring the other bills forward as quickly as possible. And again, I would support a 1-week continuing resolution to keep the government open while we were passing those bills. Then if we pass 2 or 3 bills, we could do another week and get this done by, say, mid-October.
But, Congressman, again, as you know, those 4 spending bills wouldn't keep the government open. They wouldn't get bipartisan support. The Senate's on track to potentially pass a CR with bipartisan support at some point this weekend. But let's just take a step back, because Speaker McCarthy did cut a deal with President Biden in April, and now the Republican conference is basically saying we want to cut spending below that. So isn't it incumbent upon the House to figure out how to move forward at this point?
Well, that was a terrible deal for the country when Speaker McCarthy essentially surrendered to the Democrat position in the Senate, the Democrat position in the White House. It was
but
basically,
he struck the deal.
It was basically
he struck the deal.
It was basically an agreement to keep all the Pelosi, Biden, Schumer policies in place, not to cut our spending. And that's the reason why we haven't passed our spending bills, because 1/3 of Republicans voted against that deal and didn't support it. So there obviously is no way to get to a majority when you have 1/3 of your party doesn't support the deal that you made. If he would have stuck with the Limit, Save, Grow deal that we made, that we compromised to pass an increase the debt ceiling out of the House back in April, then we would have already passed our spending bills. So he needs to fight to pass the spending bills and cut our spending and implement our policies just as hard as he fought to become Speaker. He needs to keep the commitments that he made in order to become Speaker, and that's what it's going to take to fund the government from the House side, at least.
And I hear what you're saying. You don't like the deal that he cut, but the bottom line is he did make this agreement with President Biden. So again, isn't it on the Speaker's shoulders and the House to try to resolve this issue, given that you're saying we're not going to go along with that deal that was struck?
Well, the House Republicans are not going to go along with the deal or don't go along with what Chuck Schumer wants to do in the Senate. So people like you seem to say, oh, it's on the House Republicans. The Senate Democrats haven't passed anything out of the Senate yet. They certainly haven't passed any spending bills. Republicans in the House have passed 4. And while we should have passed all 12 of ours, we've made more progress than the Senate Democrats have.
Well, it's not just people like me. Former Republican House Speaker Newt Gingrich had this to say about the opposition to the continuing resolution in the House. He said, quote, "I find it hard to understand what they want because they change constantly. That's a big part of the problem." What would you say to Speaker Gingrich? What is it that the holdouts want?
I don't think anybody in the House really cares what Speaker Gingrich has to say. He looks at that through a speaker lens. I'm sure that he wouldn't want House members not doing whatever he said when he was Speaker. But we've returned to regular order here in the House. Every member has a voice. It takes 218 in the House to pass legislation. And we certainly didn't have a majority or a strong majority of Republicans vote for that terrible deal. And we're not going to vote for it again now.
Let me turn now to some chatter that we are hearing amongst your colleagues. There's some reporting that some Republicans want to see a motion to vacate against Speaker McCarthy early next week after today's failed vote. Is that warranted? Would you vote yes for that?
We're focused on trying to get the best outcome we can get for the American people. It isn't about who the speaker is. Again, Speaker McCarthy needs to join us in that fight and fight just as hard as he did for Speaker. If he put that same effort into passing our spending bills and leading this Republican conference to have passed our bills, as he promised to do, by the way, back in January, he also promised back in January to cut the spending to the levels we voted for back in April. He's failed to do that. Only he can provide the leadership that we need to do that. And we're focused on that outcome. But we do expect to hold him accountable to what he agreed to do when he became the speaker.
Congressman, let me just push you a little bit on that, because I didn't hear an answer. I know you're saying it doesn't matter who the speaker is, which is a pretty strong statement. But how
well,
would
I'm sure
you
that
vote?
You'd like to make it about Speaker McCarthy. We're about what we're doing for the American people.
It's not what I want. It's what members of your conference are saying, that there are discussions happening.
Well, if they've said
right
that, then you can ask them about
vote.
that then.
Would you support that? Do you think that's the right course of action? Do you think that's warranted?
Well, I have not shied away from saying I think everything is on the table to hold the speaker accountable, to do what he said he would do, and to keep the commitments he made in order to become speaker. But we're still focusing on that path forward to try to get this government funded out of the House. We don't control what the Senate does. If we pass our bills out of the House, then you go to conference committee and you negotiate and see what the best deal you can get. But what we certainly can't have him do is go surrender to the Senate, surrender to the White House, and agree to what Schumer and Biden want to do, like he did with the debt ceiling. That's a non-starter in the Republican majority.
Let me ask you, if I could, about the impeachment inquiry that kicked off this week. I want to play for you a little bit of what the lead Republican witness, Jonathan Turley, had to say yesterday. Get your reaction on the other side.
This is a question of an impeachment inquiry. It is not a vote on articles of impeachment. In fact, I do not believe that the current evidence would support articles of impeachment. That is something that an inquiry has to establish. But I also do believe that the House has passed the threshold for an impeachment inquiry into the conduct of President Biden.
So the lead witness there yesterday saying there's not enough evidence for an impeachment yet, although he did support the inquiry. Was that a setback to the overall impeachment inquiry effort?
Well, you're beginning the inquiry. How would you already have an inclusion that you're going to have a conviction in effect and you're going ahead and impeach? That would be a pretty biased inquiry. What we have, though, many members of the media say there's no evidence. There's no evidence. Matter of fact, I had someone on CNN tell me that recently. Someone on NBC's told me that recently. There's no evidence. But we've got emails, we've got text messages, we've got audio recordings, we've got eyewitness testimony, we've got bank records, we've got shell companies, LLCs, we've got visit history, we've got travel logs. All of that confirmed the president knew all about what his son was doing. He was involved with what his son was doing. He's been accused of $5 million bribe to him personally. How would we be derelict in our responsibility not to investigate that the sitting president may have accepted a $5 million bribe in exchange for policy related to the Burisma company that his son worked for in Ukraine? We would be derelict in our responsibility to the American people not to pursue that, but we'll see where the evidence goes. We're not going to conclude like you might have that there isn't evidence to convict the president. We'll see where the evidence takes us, and we'll respond accordingly.
Congressman, to be clear, I have not come to any conclusion, but so far, you all have not presented, as Jonathan Turley said, evidence that directly links President Biden to his son's business dealings. Is there a smoking gun?
I think most people understand. I think most people understand why we're having the inquiry. You've got eyewitness testimony that says Joe Biden visited with the business associates. You've got eyewitness testimony who says that Joe Biden received a $5 million bribe. And those on the oversight committee who've seen all of the evidence say it might be as much as $100 million the Biden crime family has received. Even grandkids getting hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, for the Biden brand, whatever that is. And everybody knows, of course, what it really is access to Joe Biden as the sitting vice president.
Again, your lead witness says he has not seen evidence yet to justify.
Well, thanks for trying to make the case for the Democrat Party, but we've got the majority vote. We're going to see where the inquiry goes.
I'm just
and
getting
if it leads towards impeachment,
if
it leads towards impeachment, that's what we'll pursue.
All right, Congressman Bob Good, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.